CraftLogic HQ, North Milwaukee Street, December 31st, 2025, the last day. The coffee machine is still running. 9 years, 31 clients, a waiting list, a team that joined because of a blog post Daniel wrote about doing things right, and then one decision. 9 months, and a word that spread through the same referral network that had built everything, not AI boosted anymore.
The last thing I expected to be was the person who proved everyone's fears right. About AI. About what happens when you move faster than you understand.
The reason CraftLogic died is not what you think it is. It is not the AI. It is not the market. It is not bad luck. It is something more specific and more dangerous because it is invisible until the moment it isn't. We call it the human floor. By the end of this, you will know exactly what it means. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, South Side, autumn 1992, before everything. Daniel Marsh did not grow up poor. He grew up late. His family moved from Poland to Milwaukee in 1987 when he was 9. His father worked in logistics, long shifts, reliable pay, no complaints. His mother taught piano out of the front room. The apartment was clean. The rules were clear. Clothes were ironed before school. You did not leave the table before your father finished eating. None of this was unusual. It was just visible. And visible, at 14, in a public school hallway in 1992, is a liability. The word they used was old man. Not because he was slow or weak, because he dressed the way his father told him and didn't know the right television shows. Old man, meaning you belong to the past, meaning you are not keeping up. He decided somewhere in that hallway that he would never be behind again. He would know the next thing before anyone else called it the next thing. It was a reasonable response to a specific humiliation. It was also an operating system. And operating systems, once installed, run quietly for decades. That was the wound. But the company that wound eventually built took 23 more years to arrive. River West, Milwaukee, March 2016, year 1. He was 38 when he started CraftLogic. 12 years spent building software for other people's companies, competently, invisibly, at a desk that was never quite his. Good enough at it to know exactly what he would do differently.
I know how it sounds. A mission statement on a whiteboard at 7 in the morning, alone in a spare bedroom. But I meant every word. I'd spent a decade watching software get shipped the wrong way, fast, fragile. I wanted to build the opposite.
The first 3 years were small, Daniel and 2 contractors, then 8 people, then 18. He was selective about clients, mid-sized businesses that had been burned before and needed a firm that did not miss deadlines. By 2021, CraftLogic had 26 employees and a reputation in Milwaukee for being the firm that finished what it started. Sarah had known Daniel since before CraftLogic, before the Blazers, before he had deliberately removed every trace of his father's wardrobe from his closet. She had seen the homework version and the 2 a.m. anxious version that nobody at the office ever saw. She was the thermometer. In 2021, he was not drifting. He was exactly where he wanted to be. Then he hired Mark Chen.
We are very excited about that.
CraftLogic HQ, North Milwaukee Street, September 2021, the first believer. Mark was 28 when he joined. He had turned down 2 other offers, neither of which paid less. He had read a blog post Daniel wrote in 2018 about technical debt. It had been quietly circulating in developer communities for 3 years, and it was the reason half of that year's applicant pool sent a cover letter. He was the first hire who joined because of Daniel's thinking, not just his paycheck. By 2022, CraftLogic had 31 active clients, a waiting list, and a referral rate that made the sales function nearly theoretical. No paid advertising, no outbound team. Software that worked, and clients who told other clients. The philosophy on the whiteboard was holding. And this is where the diagnosis gets uncomfortable. Because the thing that was about to destroy CraftLogic was not a mistake Daniel stumbled into. It was a decision he made deliberately, from exactly the instinct that had made him successful. CraftLogic HQ, October 2023, Year 8. He did not discover AI in a boardroom. He discovered it on a flight, reading a trade piece that made his heart rate change. Productivity gains, cost structure transformation. The phrase early adopters appeared 3 times in 4 paragraphs. Early adopters. Daniel had been hearing some version of that phrase since 1992. He spent 6 weeks running the model. If AI tools could reduce development hours by 40%, the margin transformation would be extraordinary. He ran demos. He timed outputs. The code looked good. Turns out a demo is to production software what a show apartment is to a building. Everything works. The plumbing is connected. Nobody has lived in it yet. But Daniel had run the demos, and the demos said yes. CraftLogic HQ, the conference room, January 2024, Year 9, Q1. The plan had a name before it had a methodology. AI boosted. Retrain the team to work with AI tools. Restructure the pipeline to maximize output. Reduce headcount dramatically per project. He called it human-in-the-loop optimization, meaning the humans would still be there, just fewer of them. And the loop would be shorter than it had ever been. Mark asked one question. He asked, who would own quality assurance for the business logic layer? The errors that pass syntax checks and compile cleanly, but do the wrong thing, because the specification didn't capture a rule that 6 months of client relationship would have surfaced naturally. It was the right question. Actually, it was the only question. Daniel heard it as caution. Instead of stopping to answer it, he reframed it as resistance to change.
Mark was always careful. It was his best quality, and sometimes his limitation. He was too careful. I mean, I understood his concern. But we weren't replacing judgment. We were augmenting it. I'd run the demos. The quality was there. The quality was really there.
Most people who've been in this position stop at that conclusion, but they shouldn't. Because what Daniel hadn't modeled was the difference between AI output that is technically correct and AI output that is contextually right. The first is measurable. The second requires a human who knows the client. 22 people were let go on a Thursday morning in April 2024. By noon, half had calls from competitors. The remaining 12 were the ones Daniel deemed necessary for the transition. Mark was among them. 2 other senior developers who had been with the company since year 3 were not. The first delivery under the AI-boosted workflow landed in June 2024. Patricia Voss had worked with CraftLogic since 2019. She ran operations at Hartwell Freight. CraftLogic had built and maintained their dispatch management platform for 5 years. She was not technical. She had never needed to be. The software simply worked. The June delivery introduced 4 problems she couldn't explain. A date sorting error in the dispatch queue, a rounding error in the fuel estimator, records that briefly duplicated before disappearing on refresh, and the one that took 3 weeks to find. The platform had stopped applying the rate calculation override for Hartwell's government contract shipments. That rule existed in a single paragraph on page 41 of Hartwell's original specification document. The AI pipeline had received all 51 pages. It had summarized the document to fit its context window. The summary stopped at page 33. Pages 34 through 51 contained the exception logic, the rate overrides, the regulatory compliance fields, the core business domain. The AI hadn't rejected them. It hadn't flagged them. It had simply never seen them. Parsing error, truncation applied. It's often called model laziness. And no one on a 12-person team was assigned to check what the AI had read against what it had quietly dropped. Patricia called Daniel directly. She said the software didn't feel like CraftLogic software.
Patricia was a smart operator, but she was not a developer. The government contract rate issue, that one took me by surprise. But we found it and we patched it. We patched it, right? I told her we'd have a complete fix in the next release. 2 weeks. 2 weeks is not a long time, right?
The fix took 5 weeks. and introduced two new problems. That was the technical problem. But the structural problem was already running beneath it, and it had nothing to do with the government contract rule or the date sorting error or any specific line of code. In August 2024, Mark Chen submitted a transfer request to move to a fully remote, client-facing advisory position, lateral. It removed him from the internal development pipeline entirely. Daniel approved it the same afternoon without a follow-up conversation. He did not ask why Mark wanted to leave the pipeline. He may have understood, but he may not have wanted to find out. Either way, the only person on the CraftLogic team who could name what was happening walked out of the development channel on a Tuesday and took his answer with him. And nobody held the door. CraftLogic HQ, October 2024, relational debt. The worst part wasn't the bug queue. The worst part was that every internal dashboard showed the AI-boosted workflow performing. Initial delivery timelines were down 41%. Code output per developer per week had nearly doubled. From inside CraftLogic's reporting, the transformation looked exactly like what Daniel had promised. Except the reporting didn't measure what happened after delivery. It measured output. And output, in custom software for complex businesses, is not the same thing as value. If you are currently running an AI-augmented process in your own company, and if you aren't, you soon will be, or your employees already are doing it quietly, here is the question your reporting is almost certainly not answering. What is the true cost of rework? Not the rework that gets flagged, the rework that gets absorbed into the next cycle, relabeled as a maintenance task, and never attributed to the output that caused it. At CraftLogic, that number was invisible for 8 months, until it wasn't. CraftLogic HQ, the floor. June 19, 2024, system failure. The AI pipeline ran on a third-party language model API. On June 19, 2024, the provider rolled out a new model version with a breaking change to its output format. No advance notice beyond a changelog entry published at 11 p.m. the previous night. CraftLogic's pipeline broke at 6 a.m. Nothing produced. Nothing deliverable. 47 hours down. 2 clients missed SLA windows that week. Both sent formal written notices. Daniel wrote back that it was a vendor infrastructure event, which was accurate. But the reason a vendor infrastructure event became a 47-hour client impact was not the vendor. It was the absence of any human buffer. The developers who would have kept client commitments running manually while the pipeline was repaired had been let go 2 months earlier. That was the dependency problem. But there was a second failure type running in parallel, one that was harder to see and harder to explain to a client who couldn't understand how their software had passed review and still didn't work. CraftLogic HQ, the conference room. September 2024, critical threshold. An education technology client had a specification with 2 distinct concepts: student progress and student performance. Both measured learning. Both used overlapping language throughout the document. In the client's system, they were tracked in separate data models, a regulatory distinction required for accreditation reporting. The specification was ambiguous about the boundary between them. A developer with a 20-minute phone call would have flagged it before writing a single line of code. Instead, the AI took the path of least resistance. It merged both into a single data structure. The delivered software was functional. It passed every test in the brief. It was non-compliant with the client's accreditation body's reporting requirements. That surfaced during their annual audit, 4 months after delivery. The AI hadn't been reckless. It had been efficient, in exactly the way that makes it dangerous when there is no human on the other side, with the context to know that efficiency and correctness are not always the same thing. When a specification is ambiguous, a developer asks. An AI infers. And inference, at scale, compounds. Most boards looking at a situation like this would stop at the bug count, but they shouldn't. The actual decay is in the gap between what the specification said and what the client meant. That gap has always existed in custom software. For 30 years, experienced developers bridged it with phone calls, with instinct, with a relationship. Remove those developers and the gap stays. Nobody bridges it. Sarah said two things to him that evening. She said them once and she didn't repeat them. She said, "I just want to make sure you're building what you wanted to build, not what you feel like you're supposed to build right now." Then, "You used to talk about the work, now you talk about the process." He heard the first as support, but he didn't appear to hear the second at all. By July 2025, CraftLogic had 6 employees including Daniel, 11 active clients, 5 of them in formal review or hold. The support queue had not cleared below 600 open tickets in 10 months. Yet the AI-boosted workflow was still producing code. Every morning, on schedule. The system was working. It was just working on the wrong things, at a pace that made the wrong things harder and harder to recover from. CraftLogic HQ, the conference room, 48 hours before dissolution, the human floor. By December 2025, 8 clients had formally terminated. 2 more had given notice. The referral network that had built CraftLogic, the one that had worked without a sales team for 9 years, was now carrying a different word. Not AI boosted, AI busted. The term spread through the same channels the positive recommendations had traveled. In fact, it spread faster, as these things always do. Now let's name what actually happened. Not the bug queue, not the vendor downtime, not the specification errors, and not the issues that made Patricia Voss call Daniel. Those were the symptoms. The human floor is the minimum threshold of human judgment that a process requires to function without compounding its own errors. Every process has one, AI augmented or not. The floor defines the point below which the system cannot self-correct, because the people who would catch and correct errors have been removed. CraftLogic's floor required, at minimum, developers with enough client context to catch what the AI could not catch about itself. Context that took months to build. Context that lived in people. In the memory of a conversation about government contract rates. In the instinct of a developer who knew that when 2 concepts share overlapping language in a spec, you pick up the phone before you write the first line. When the headcount dropped below the floor, the errors did not increase proportionally. They compounded. Each uncaught error introduced a false assumption into the next iteration. The AI had no mechanism for knowing it was building on mistakes. Nobody was left to tell it. The mistake most founders make is reading a story like this and thinking, our AI implementation is different, our specs are tighter, our review process is better. The uncomfortable reality is this. The human floor is not a function of how good your AI tools are. It is a function of how much context your process requires that lives nowhere in any document. In custom software, that number is always higher than the efficiency model predicts, because the model measures what can be measured. Context cannot be measured. It can only be lost. When you find out the floor was there, you find out by falling through it.
What I can't explain is how I didn't stop when Mark left the pipeline. On some level, I understood what that meant. He was the person who asked the right question in that January meeting, and instead of answering it, I approved his transfer without a single follow-up conversation. I think I needed him not to be there, because if he was there, I'd have to keep hearing the question. I fired 28 people to prove I wasn't the old man in the hallway. And what I built instead was a company that looked modern from the outside and had no one left inside who knew what the clients actually needed. Built right, not just built. I had that on the whiteboard for 9 years. And then I forgot what it meant.
Daniel Marsh built a company on the belief that quality is not an aesthetic. It is a structural requirement. He believed it completely. He had it on a whiteboard. And then a word found him. Not from a client, not from the market, from somewhere older. And it said, "Keep up." And he did. And he stopped building things right. And the word boosted became the word busted. And the referral network carried it. And the company that had needed no sales team to grow needed no announcement to die. The whiteboard mission statement was still there at the end, but under the pipeline diagrams. The R of right, The N of not. Still there. Nobody erased it. Daniel Marsh has since left Milwaukee. He has told people close to him that he is thinking about going to South America for a while. Somewhere remote. Somewhere without reliable connectivity. He says that is entirely the point. Whether that is a plan or a pause, only he knows. Sarah, his wife, fears it is a breakdown. He asked me before we finished our conversations to say one thing. He said, "Tell them the AI didn't fail. I failed the AI. I gave it a job it could not do without the people I removed." That is fair, and it is incomplete. So let me add what he cannot yet say clearly. The first lesson: before you reduce headcount around an AI augmentation, you need to answer one question precisely. What does this process know that the AI does not? Not generally, specifically. Name the knowledge, name where it lives, name the person who carries it. If you cannot answer that, you have not yet earned the right to remove the person who carries it. The second lesson is the one that doesn't belong in a business framework. It belongs to Daniel specifically, but I've seen enough of these stories to know it applies more broadly. The instinct that makes you build something is not always the instinct that tells you how to build it well. Sometimes the thing that drove you to start, the need to prove something to someone decades before your company existed, becomes the thing that, at exactly the wrong moment, makes you reckless. Not dishonest, not lazy. Reckless in the specific way of someone who needs a decision to be right more than they need it to be examined. Daniel Marsh was running from a hallway in 1992. CraftLogic was the answer to it. When AI arrived and offered him the chance to be not just current, but genuinely, verifiably ahead, he took all of it, without the caution that had made him great. The wound from the past was still running. He never learned to hear it as a wound. He heard it as drive. Every founder in these stories thought they'd see it coming. None of them did. Subscribe and you'll learn to recognize the pattern before you're the one living it. Sarah told me the last message she received from him the night before he boarded the flight said 3 words: going to stop. She said she read it 4 times before she understood it was the most hopeful thing he'd said in 2 years.